Hi, I'm FTG, and welcome to another Deck Tech Breakdown. Today we're going over Lagomos, Hand of Hatred, and it's another cheap commander. It's only 3 CMC, which again, I love just because your chances of being able to recast it multiple times increases. Is that darn commander tax. Going into what this commander does, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So what I really like about this, it instantly inspired, based on this other card that exists, this kind of weird elemental sacrifice tribal that almost wants you to force your opponents to fight each other as well, almost inputting some goat effects and stuff. So that was the initial whoa, that's where my brain went as soon as I read that. So what I'm talking about regarding elemental fight fest here is Rite of the Raging Storm is a 5 CMC enchantment, and creatures named Lightning Ranger can't attack you or a planeswalker you control. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a 5/1 red elemental creature token named Lightning Ranger onto the battlefield. It has trample, haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this creature. There's so much cool stuff I think you can do with this concept, right? Because they're not being exiled. Those tokens are not being exiled. They're being sacrificed on end step. So when you look back to what your commander does, it's the same thing, right? So sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So I think with this theme of giving, other people elemental tokens or giving yourself elemental tokens and they die at end step, means that you can look at those death triggers that you're going to be getting from it. So potentially you're going to be forcing your opponents to fight each other with these elemental tokens that they can't hit you with, and you're going to potentially get death triggers when those die if you have something like Blood Artist out on the battlefield. So that whole concept there just kind of instantly shot into my mind of this is something that is a really cool potential direction that you could take this commander. In the second part of this ability, you have search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate it only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. So I think this one's going to be a little bit trickier to set up, but I could almost picture this being you sack your board and then you go find Living Death in your library and you cast Living Death, bring all your creatures back from your graveyard to the battlefield, and your opponents are potentially losing anything that's really cool from that. So you can make that quite miserable for your opponents too. If you put in Plushback Marauder effects where, the creatures that they do get back from their graveyard, they then have to sacrifice them because of these Flushback effects that you have in there. The direction overall with this that I would want to take this deck is just silly goad elemental sub-tribal thing with a lot of drain and graveyard recursion, because if you're going to be sacrificing stuff trying to get that commander second ability, I think you need to, sometimes you're not going to have the tokens that you need to sacrifice, so you're probably going to have to sacrifice something you care about. But if you do that, you're going to want to have a way to bring it back, obviously. The first piece of this I was looking at was drain win cons, right? So you have your Blood Artist, you have Veto, Thorn of Dusk Rose, Grey Merchant. Apostle is going to be huge for just reanimating, hitting people for a lot of damage. I think you also need to use free sack outlets, because again, if your goal is to, grab Living Death and recast, cast it and bring everything back, you're going to have a way to essentially sack your board and make sure you have enough mana, 1, to protect your Living Death win con, but 2, to, fill your graveyard with creatures you care about so you can reanimate them. And with that, I think Viserys here, Woe Strider are great. Phyrexian Ghoul's another one. I like the ones that are kind of cheaper mana cost or give you a token. Phyrexian Ghoul's cool too, because if you sacrifice other stuff, it pumps it up. It gives it +2/+2 until end of turn. So maybe that's a cool sneaky way you could try blocking as well. Talked about our Gary win con. We talked about, how Living Death can help. I think in a way too that the idea here is if you're forcing your opponents to attack each other this whole time and make it hard to attack you, then you're gonna already make it easier for that big burst of damage through a drain. But overall, you're gonna have to find a way to protect yourself. So I think to both trickery and maybe if you feel throwing down the money for it, Imp's Mischief might be a fun way to just surprise counter someone I bought one of those a while ago, so I just threw that out there because I'm like, oh, I have one of these. I could totally throw this in the deck. But I get it's like an absurdly expensive like counter spell, and yeah. So if you don't want to use that, totally get it. But overall, I think this is going to be a really fun deck. I can see like using Disrupt Decorum to like make people fight each other, have their defenses up, you know, so then that way you can just hit them for damage and not have to worry about being open, or kind of like a, you know, Cunning Rhetoric. There's also like Shakedown Heavy too, which I think is an interesting political card because it's only a 3-drop. And if people let you draw a card, then, you know, it removes it from combat. And then at that point, it's just like a huge 6/5 or 6/4 or something like that can just block. So I think there's some really interesting kind of like goad, almost political effects that you can have in Rakdos that then you can, you know, do these fun like little elemental sub-tribal themes to hit face, and, you know, hopefully at the end of the day you can close out the game by draining out the table with some sort of like Drain Gary Blood Artist effect or something. But yeah, so that was just my idea for this commander. I'm actually really excited because I think I might build this one, but I keep saying that about all the commanders I've been talking about because there's so many cool ideas here. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I would love to hear like what your thoughts are on this commander, because I think there's a few interesting directions you could take this one if you wanted to, and have a good one. Bye.